Up until now, in my series of lectures recommending you what to read to improve your English and your research skills, I usually recommend it to a specific author, many times an author that wrote many books, or plays or poems. Today, I want to recommend to you a very specific book. The book is Stoner by John Williams. It's a novel. It's a very short novel. In fact, it's so short that if you don't like spoilers, I would recommend to you, don't watch forever, pause the video, pick up the book, read it through in a couple of hours, and then you'll be ready to hear the rest of the video. If you don't mind spoilers or you already read the book, you're welcome to continue to watch. Why did I choose Stoner from other books? Such a short novel, relatively easy English, relatively readable, but I would not say particularly beautifully written. The reason is simple. The book is essential to understand the life of a scholar, any person working in academia, especially in the humanities and the social sciences, any author, any writer, any intellectual. If you want to understand the world of the spirit with all the challenges that it involves, you need to read this short novel, Stoner. My name is Shai Dotan. I'm Associate Professor of International and Public Law at the University of Copenhagen, Faculty of Law. And the purpose of this series of lectures is to help you improve your English and your research skills. The basic story of Stoner is relatively simple, and it's very much autobiographic. It describes the life story of John Williams, the author. So, John Williams, just like Stoner, grew up in a family of very simple farmers. They worked very hard in the fields all day. When night came, they sat home and they would watch the paint peel off the walls as a form of entertainment. They didn't read books. They didn't talk to each other. They didn't have any complicated ideas. And Stoner goes to the university at the request of his father to study agronomy. Basically the scientific principles that are necessary to become a better farmer. And as luck would have it, one of the elect courses that he has to take is in literature. He immediately falls in love with literature and starts to study, becomes an excellent student, decides to study further, makes a PhD, and becomes a professor of literature. Sounds incredible? That's exactly the life story of John Williams, and that's also the story of his protagonist, Stoner, in the book. And this, one can say, a very inspiring story of somebody that comes from a family that was not connected to any form of literature or anything connected to the world of the spirit, and becomes a professor and becomes a very dedicated professor who really cares about teaching and loves literature, is already, I think, a form of inspiration for many. And inside the book, you will find many examples of scenes and discussions that are very necessary for anybody pursuing an academic career. I want to mention three of those. One is a scene that I mentioned many times. I may have even mentioned it in one of my other lectures on YouTube. It's a situation where Stoner is sitting together with two friends. One of his friends is somebody that during World War I fought, became recognized, came back triumphant, becomes the dean of a faculty, and he is a very practical man. The other is a man that is a much more idealistic, probably the most brilliant of a bunch, and the last one is Stoner. And this idealistic, brilliant friend is trying to diagnose how they think about academia. He says, you, the dean war hero guy, you think about academia as a very pragmatic tool for making society better. So we teach literature, very abstract field, but we have students, and some of our students will be literature teachers at high schools, and they will teach students who would then become better people, better citizens, and affect society for the better. And you, he says to Stoner, you have some kind of a religious dedication to science for its own sake. So that's its own goal to make science greater and the world of ideas more developed. And me, he says about himself, I realize that we live in a world of different personalities, and some people just have this, you can call it a mental illness, or at least a mental peculiarity, that we need to study, and we need to study among people that are similar to us. So we are basically, in my opinion, just guarding an asylum for people that have this unique predicament that they need to study. And that's our job. Now, why do I like this scene so much, and why do I quote it so many times? Because I really think of myself as a teacher, as a scholar. I often find myself grasping to one of these reasons to justify what I'm doing. And sometimes I do think about, the pragmatic effects of what I'm doing, especially that I'm in a more pragmatic field, in law, how I can make society better. And sometimes I just think that I need to solve an idea because that's what I was put on this earth to do, and that's my unique role as a scholar. And I've written, for example, a whole book that is very philosophical, just because of that. I mean, I can say that I couldn't help it. I just thought that it was some kind of the muses were controlling me and made me research it through. And many times I do think about my own students and the people at my faculty as people that are part of a community, that it is part of my job to guard and to protect and to improve. So all these things are relevant, and I think that's a very, very powerful scene in the book. Another scene that it's not just a scene, but it's a situation that I think is worth thinking about. Is a situation when everybody is going over to the war. I think it was World War I, if I remember correctly, not World War II. And Stoner was also considering to do that. And then one of his former professors, the one that was really his key mentor, was basically telling him not to do that, or rather encouraging him to understand that he has a higher responsibility. Now, I come from a country, from Israel, that has always been in war. I remember how it felt like to walk the corridors at the university when there's war going on outside. I've lived through this experience a significant part of my adult life. I don't have, very elevated things to say about that. I think that also the book captures how sad it is, to be dealing with ideas when there are young men just as talented, if not more, that are dying to protect you. And I think what the book shows is that it's a choice that has its own prices, not just in terms of the personal conscience that sometimes attacks you for not contributing more, but also very vividly in the case of Stoner in terms of his promotion. He knew, and his professor also told him that. I mean, I know that you will be promoted more as a professor if you will return from war, no matter what you do, basically. You work in some background office and do something, it will help your career. And still I tell you, don't do that. Invest in the thing that you were put on this earth to do, which is to study and to teach literature. So I don't have any good advice here. I just think that understanding how lonely it can be sometimes to be in the world of a spirit, and to understand that this is something that you just have to brave through if you are to be part of this world, is something very important. And this applies to a lot of things. I mean, it can be a war, in a war situation, or some kind of a civil unrest or political issues, but you just have to keep working on your books, on your ideas, to serve the muses in this way. And again, without any very specific conclusions here, I just think that capturing this atmosphere is something that would help a lot of scholars in times of unrest, where they can know everybody's here within these walls of a campus is in the same predicament. We understand the difficulty, and if we conduct ourselves in a way that is honorable, then we have done what we should have done. And the third scene that I want to focus on is the end of the book. Again, there is a spoiler alert here. Stoner becomes ill in cancer or something like that, and dies within a very short time. And the first thing that goes through his mind is, I need to finish grading all my assignments and do everything that I need to do for my students, basically. Which is, on the one hand, something that is, again, could be inspiring to see the level of dedication and purity in this man. He's going to die anyway, and it's not like he's shaping the fate of nations, but every student for him counts, and that's some kind of a work ethic that I think is admirable, but at the same time should give you pause. You should really think, is it always the most admirable thing to focus on your very, very specific and limited word with its own rules, its own sets of principles? I'm not sure. This is a choice that I think everybody needs to make for their own right. I often hear about academics after they pass away, especially I follow in Israel because it's a smaller country and I read the news there. And one of the things that they often say about an academic is he was a pure academic. He didn't do anything else. He didn't do consulting. He didn't go into politics. He didn't write books for a general audience. He didn't do that. He didn't do that. He didn't do that. And I can really see, the admiration of the people writing the obituary that say how dedicated was he, how upright was he, how pure was he or she. I am not sure if this is something that I recommend. I think this is really something that a person needs to decide on their own, but they need to make a conscious decision. And they need to make a conscious decision in the changing world, which is, again, something that I think we should all be aware of. I mean, some of my professors were a unique resource because they remembered exactly the number of a page in the official publication of every important judgment. When I was sitting in the audience as a student, we used to laugh at them because we could search it on a CD or in a second. Now we can search on the internet in a second from anywhere over the world. We need to realize that our higher skills of writing beautiful text, analyzing really, really complicated issues, sometimes over a whole monograph, is something that can very easily be replaced in the age of AI within a very short amount of time. As my viewers know, I already showed some potential solutions for writing a paper in 90 minutes. And I don't see any reason why technology will not allow it to write it in 5 seconds and to make it better than a human being can. So if this is the word that we're entering in here, and I think that the technical difficulties that prevent us from reaching this stage will probably disappear over the last 5 years, how noble is it to be so pure? Okay, it was a time in which these people served a very important purpose for the 3 reasons that we mentioned before, because they were guardians of knowledge that served all of society, because they were producing something that nobody else, no being that we know of in the universe could produce in the service of God or some other higher purpose. And they were guarding a community of people where everybody could, live in a certain level of intellectual brotherhood. And now that's taken away. So if you are starting out today as an academic, or even in my position, relatively at the beginning of a career or mid-career, do I want to find myself dying, hopefully many years from now, and just say I did only that, something that could be easily replaced by AI? I'm not sure. It's worth thinking about it. After describing my thoughts about some of the main scenes in the book in a way that I think is not fully admiring but also a bit critical, let me go to the main critique of the book. I think that the story of Stoner is a story of a failed life, of a failure. Let's see aspect after aspect. He married somebody that he probably loved at the beginning, who probably faced a lot of issues. I don't know exactly what they are. I don't want to get into this psychological discussions, but the marriage failed horribly. So not only did they basically not communicate, but without divorcing, they basically lived in an estranged and painful life where his wife basically prevented him from succeeding in his work or having anything meaningful going on in his life. So that's a failed aspect. In addition to that, he stopped writing. He wrote just one book right at the beginning of his career. He was very talented. No doubt that he could produce maybe 10, 20 books during a very fruitful career. And then once he starts this tension with his wife, with a combination with some other things, he basically stops writing completely. So he's not writing anything. He said he enjoys to read just for general knowledge and escapism, but he's not really producing any research. So somebody that would view his academic career as the most important, this is a complete failure. In addition to that, he is not making any attempt to fight through his academic career. So he has a very small faculty. In his faculty, he managed somehow to make a very, very powerful enemy out of a very small set of professors. And this powerful enemy is basically harming him all the time, humiliating him. He manages once time to fight back, because they give him to teach a course that he hates early in the morning, so to really humiliate him as much as possible. And he just teaches something different from the curriculum. And very soon after he does that, they surrender. But instead of saying, okay, I can win that, so I can try to promote myself, become more senior in my own system, more influential, he just gives it up completely. So he has tenure, which is fine, he cannot be fired, but he doesn't really make any mark on academia from a pragmatical perspective. He has an affair, which is probably the most heartwarming part of the whole story, which is otherwise quite sad. And the moment that his enemy is trying to prevent that, he has an affair with somebody who is a student, and basically the enemy finds out about it, and instead of moving to a new university, trying a new life, trying to find some way to find it, he just gives it up also. So the affair is gone. He's left with a wife that he hates and hates him, and they're not leading to anything successful, not as an author, because he's not writing anything, not as an academic. He has one daughter, and he just gives up on her in a way, because the relation with the wife is impossible, and he uses that as an excuse basically not to notice that the daughter is deteriorating to alcoholism, and basically her own life is a failure. And then when he dies relatively young from cancer, he leaves nothing behind, not besides his first book that he lives through at the end of his life, and has some sense of pride that he made something. No family that loves him, no successful career, no literature that he leaves behind. Absolutely nothing. How? How is that possible? I mean, nobody is harder working than Stoner. When he was studying literature, he had to support himself by working in a farm from sunrise, very hard physical work, then going to the university, and from somebody that was used to watching the paint peel on the wall, he managed to excel in a very short time, learning literature, different subjects, Latin, Greek, historical literature. All of this he did. So how did he fail in his life? So what I want you to do, if you read this book again, or if you read this book after you heard this talk, try to notice how the paragraphs are organized in the book. And see that in almost every book, there's a paragraph that ends with some kind of a fatalistic statement. Something like, and this was the last time you ever saw it. Or, and this was the last time they ever spoke about it. It's always the last time. It's always something that is trying to put a final statement, closing a period, closing a relationship, closing an endeavor. I have to tell you that I noticed that as I was reading, and it was very annoying for me. As somebody that teaches writing, I think that generally fatalistic writing is usually a bad idea. I mean, you sometimes want to kind of put your foot down and say, okay, that's it. I'm not going to speak more about this subject. That ends the issue. But if you do it more than a very small measure, it becomes either strange or pathetic. Here, what I think it actually reflects is some kind of a poverty of a mind in a way. So I think that the upbringing of Stoner, as somebody that was used to no luxury, no time for making choices, no time for hesitation, for dreaming, for fantasy, basically controlled his life. So he was used to a statement that would say this is the end of something, because he was used to saying, I have to wake up at this hour and milk the cows, because if I will not do that, I will be sick. Okay, so I have to do it in any way. And then once I've done it, I've done my job. But the issue is that the life of a scholar or an intellectual doesn't look like that. It's a life that involves sometimes not days or weeks or months, sometimes years, even decades sometimes of hesitation. You're not sure what you're doing. You have to make complicated choices. You have to define to yourself what makes life worthwhile for you, what you think is important. And you do it from a very privileged position. You do it from a position of security, that, financial security, health security, that basically keeps you in a position where you are able to wonder and to think through problems for a very long way. Now, all these things are usually brought as disadvantages, and if done to an extreme version, they are. There are a lot of people that fail as academics and as individuals because they have too much luxury, the luxury of thinking through things and trying to find themselves throughout their life. I believe that this is one of the sicknesses that our age is full of. A lot of young kids that never really had to work hard through something, fail, and eventually succeed. But at the same time, the opposite extreme is also dangerous, especially for the world of intellect. Because if you are used to a situation where the only thing that is between you and success is a very specific and well-formed amount of work, then when you're faced with a situation where you're not even sure what you want, or even if you're sure what you want, you don't know how much work is required, or sometimes you put in the work and you still have failed, and you still didn't reach what you want, and you need to know how to deal with that, then you're stuck. And that's something that I think is a bit dangerous. So I think about that as a father, and thinking about trying to educate my own kids, and thinking, what is the best way to guide them? Do I try to make them work very, 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 very hard right from a young age at things that are relevant for them, of course, to study and to improve? I'm just afraid that if I do that, I lose the capacity to, they would lose the capacity to dream and to hesitate and to think through complicated problems. And I think that's also something that is very, very necessary, especially at specific periods. I think that around the time when kids are, I remember the time of my bar mitzvah, and I think that there's a time around the age of 12, 13, it's very important to let kids relax a little bit, think about God, about religion, about tradition, about family. Let them think. Take them away from the hustle of events. And I think that probably another period like this around the 20s, if you remember the period, for example, being in army, being out of the army. In Israel, the army is actually a very good period to do that sometimes, where somebody is a bit away from the track of a career. They work very, very hard, but then after they do the work in the army, they realize, okay, I have time to think about my own future. And then later, I think also around the 40s, which is the point I am now, and I tell to myself, I know that if I'm going to succeed in the task that I meant for myself, I'm going to need to work very, very, very hard. But I also know that before I choose these tracks, I need to be able to be very flexible in my mind. Because if I do not do that, I would just end up, picking up a specific goal that is not well formed enough, working very hard and potentially failing, and then just leaving it, just as Storner did. So he had one good book that he wrote at the beginning of his career. He was about to write a second book. I know the feeling of writing a second book. I know how hard it is. It can take several years until I published my second book in the same press, in Cambridge University Press, that I published my first. And he just gave up somewhere along the line because he wasn't really used to a situation where you put in all the work, but it takes another 5, 6, 7 years to get to the result. The same goes in relationships. The same goes in other things in life. So the message is, if you want to really learn from the experience of Storner, you understand already the value of work and hard work and dedication. This the book makes very, very clear. But you also have to understand that you can never give up. And you can never end with some kind of fatalistic statement that says, this route failed and it will never succeed again. No. There's always a way around things. And if you are flexible, if you know how to dream and challenge your opinion, you can find a way that eventually will lead you where you need to go. Thank you very much for listening. As always, please like and subscribe to the video. You're welcome to share it. You're also welcome to check in the description below the essay that this book is built on. If you prefer reading to listening, it's a short essay, it's not as long as a video. You're welcome to listen to that. And you can also check, it's on my website in WordPress, 24 other essays that are already there and may also be interesting for you. Thank you very much and keep learning.